My name is Jeff Chasin. I'm a senior evangelist on the evangelism team for digital experience. I've worked with launch and tag management systems for a long time now. And I know that many folks in the Magento communities, the developer communities, user communities, etc., may or may not be familiar with tag management systems. So we're going to do a quick introduction, sort of set the tone for what we're going to cover. We'll do a quick walk through the user interface. I'm not going to read every screen to you, but we'll show you just the key areas of the system to be familiar with, just as a highlight. And then we'll talk about extensibility, how we can extend and customize the product in different ways to make bend it sort of to work exactly the way you want. And if we have time, we will pause at the end for questions and do a quick wrap up. There is a lot to cover in the 45-minute session, so I'm going to talk fast in order to cover the material. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and hit them in the session chat. So if you work in digital marketing, if you run a Magento store, you run a site, and you're trying to sell products or services, you're obviously aware that there are a wide variety of marketing and advertising technologies and tools and systems that you can deploy on your site to help you, whether it's remarketing, retargeting, advertising, whatever your campaigns and whatever your strategies and tactics involve, there's a system to help you do it. This is a close-up of a slide that many people have seen before. It's the marketing and advertising technology Lumascape or Landscape by a guy named Scott Brinker. He runs a blog called Chief Martech. And you can see we're just up in the little corner here for channel and partner marketing, e-commerce, sales automation, enablement. You can see all these logos. Adobe is on here, of course, HP, Media Radar, Personali, Quark. I mean, there's thousands. And if I expand this out to full size, you'll see that it gets crazy with these logos, right? Very quickly. How many people, how many companies are involved in this? Well, in the spring of 2020, I think this was done in April, there were 8,000 different marketing and advertising technology systems from different vendors that you could deploy to your Magento site. Adobe Launch is a tag management system that helps you deploy, maintain, and manage these tags and these systems from a variety of different vendors. So let's see what that looks like in the system. This is sort of a basis of which to go on, that if you use a subset of these different 8,000 marketing and advertising tags, some companies use 10, some companies use 1, and some companies use many of them. Regardless of how many you use or how many different vendors you work with, managing them with Launch through your Magento store makes it much easier for sure. So where I'm in my Magento admin screen, and if you go into content and configuration, and then you get to your web store settings, global settings for your store view, and you scroll down to the HTML head section of your templates, your pages, and you expand this, you'll see a section called scripts and style sheets, where you can add links to CSS, to style sheets, and to JavaScript files for any behavior or appearance changes that you would like to make. The include that we're interested in here, in order to install Launch into your store and into your site, you add one line of code. This line that you see highlighted is just a link to a JavaScript file. And if I paste that up into the head section of the document, then it will be applied at runtime in the browser as visitors are coming to our store to check out our site. And so this is my demo site, this Luma. It's a fitness brand, and they sell different kinds of gear and workout clothes, etc. And if I look at the source of this page for this site, you see highlighted here on this line right here that's highlighted in blue, that is that same embed code. And you can see the 66DD9 at the end. And if I go back to my settings, we see this 66DD9 development min, right? Same file and that's included in the head section of our document. If I actually click on this link and open a tab to the JavaScript file itself, this, of course, is minified, which doesn't really help us much. But if you go up here to the browser address bar and you get rid of the min, then you can see the expanded, non-minified, non-obfuscated code that actually, this is the client-side code that makes Launch do the heavy lifting as a visitor visits your site. And so we're not going to go through line by line of the code, obviously. So let me close this up and come over to Launch. So this is actually the Launch interface. And before we get too far into this, been going for a few minutes, let me just check the chat pod. Okay. Any questions? Again, just if you have any problems with the sound or what have you, just go ahead and feel free to post them in the session chat. So again, this is the homepage of my test site, and this is the user interface for Launch. As an Adobe customer, all of the Adobe Digital Experience customers get access to Launch. We also make Launch available to partners through our partner network. So if you're working with an Adobe partner, that's another way to talk to folks about getting access to Launch or checking it out. And you see here in the user interface for my company, I have just a demo company, and these are my different properties. Company is sort of the top level account for Launch, and then each property within your company is just a way to group your digital assets. So for example, my store that I showed you earlier, my Luma yoga and activewear brand, this store is in a property that's called Luma. So if I click into the property, all of the data collection and distribution that I want to manage, all of the 8,000 different marketing and advertising tags that I might want to deploy, I would manage those here in this property. And you can set up your properties in a number of ways. We have some customers that they have one or two websites in a property. And then we have other customers that include a large number of websites in each property. It's a flexible system, and you can change your mind once you set it up one way. If you decide you'd like it better a different way, it's easy to change your mind. And that is, of course, one of the main benefits to using a tag management system like Launch, is it makes it easy to change your mind. So if you're testing things in terms of your marketing campaigns, if you're testing content, you're testing different offers and calls to action on your store, using a system like Launch can make it very easy to change direction as your data comes in and you find out what's working and what maybe needs some effort to improve your results. And so regardless, using a tag management system makes those things much easier. So we're in our property. This is just a quick overview screen. It usually shows you what you've done recently. This is a demo property, so I haven't done anything really recently in it. And the main navigation is over here on the left-hand side. We're looking again at the overview. The rules is where most of the work happens when we're working with Launch. So just as a quick demo to show you that this actually is all wired together correctly. Again, for my store here, if I go to, let's just say the men section, because I'm looking for new, what are these, running shorts, maybe. And so here's my URL, right? And it says men.html is the name of the page. So maybe just as a quick test, I'm going to add a rule and say men page test. Just keep it simple. We'll choose an event to trigger this rule. And the event is furnished by the core extension. We have a number of extensions in Launch, which we'll talk about in a minute. There are a variety of events that you can listen for and hook into, and then take an action based on when those events occur. And so for this, you can see there's a variety of built-in events that we can use to trigger a rule. But in this case, we're just going to say the window loaded event. And so I'm going to make a note to myself or to other non-technical users just so they know what this is. And so when the page loads, we'll give that a name. Keep it simple. We'll keep the changes, and then we'll take an action. And in this case, just to show that it's working, we're going to do a quick custom code. I'm going to open the editor, and I'm going to trigger an alert, just very simple. And I'm going to say, here's an alert from Launch. And we'll save that. and we'll keep our changes, and we will save that to our library that we're currently working with. And you see this little indicator up here that a build is required, this little yellow indicator. So I'm going to click on the build button to build our library. We do have a processing and publishing workflow that I'll take you through. You see here on the left where it talks about publishing, and that involves getting changes that are done within your tag management system, within Launch, out to your site. And if you have a variety of non-production environments like dev and QA and test and stage, whatever your typical workflow is for front-end development, you can match that in Launch. For this demo, I'm just using a development environment so we can skip the publishing flow when I make changes just to keep it faster, but you wouldn't do that. Generally speaking, you wouldn't do that in production. So if I go back to my page and I reload, then I should see that alert. There it is. Here's an alert from Launch. So we know it's working because I made a change here in Launch in the interface, and it happened here on my site live when I visited the site. And again, that's all because in our store view, in our configuration, we added this one line of JavaScript code. And so pretty much anything you could do in JavaScript, you can do through Launch because it gets deployed through that include. So let's go ahead and we'll take that out. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that rule. Again, it's pretty easy to change your mind when you're working with Launch. And the other item that's worth talking about in Launch as a highlight is a very important area, which are called data elements. And so if I click on a data element's basically like a variable or a mapping. So it's a pointer. So for example, if I go into this men's page, or let's just say we go into gear, right? We go to fitness equipment, just to mix it up a little bit. And we'll see here's a water bottle, and we're still getting our alert, which we know it's working. And I'll get rid of that because it's going to show up on every page. So let's go back to rules. And I'm going, go back to rules. I'm going to disable these rules just for now. And then I'm going to run, it's going to run a build to take them out of that library so that they're no longer active on that page. And if I go to the publishing flow, I should be able to see that. Here's my library. Here's the green indicator that the build was successful. We see that it was changed, and this rule and both of my test rules here you can see are marked as disabled in the publishing flow. And so if I go back to my site and I navigate back to, say, fitness equipment, now we see the alert doesn't pop up because that rule has been disabled. So that's a quick preview of the publishing workflow. But if I go back to data elements and I go to my site, let's open up the view source of this page, and we see a variety of information that we could potentially need to capture for our analytics or our marketing or advertising tags. For example, we have a data layer. In this case, we have a piece of a data layer, window.ds data layer object, with a variety of fields that we can capture. So for example, in this data layer, there's a page object and a page type of default. So let's say, for example, we wanted to capture the page type for our analytics. We would look at DS data layer page and page type, and we can check for that here by opening the console and looking for window.ds. It's data layer, let's say. Let's just copy that and go back to fitness equipment. And there it is, right? So we have the data layer. I think I spelled it wrong. And if I go to page, there's page. And if I go to page type, you see it's a category page. So if I copy this dot notation, this JavaScript dot notation, the syntax, and I create a new data element, and I say that's going to be my page type, then a non-technical user doesn't have to know anything about dot notation or objects or JavaScript. And we can just set a variable, excuse me, to represent that page type. And so now the page type data element in Launch will point to this page top property of this object that exists on that page. And if I save it to the library, now I have a page type data element. I'm going to go ahead and build my library so that it actually exists in my development environment that I have set up. And just remember here that it's page type in capital title case with a space between page type because it is case sensitive. And if I go back to this page, and if I say satellite.getVar is the way to access a data element from the console. So we called that page type with this the format. And if I say getVar of the page type, I should be, let's see. Reload. And there's category. I just needed to refresh the page, to refresh the library. So we have the page type data element, and it, again, using the getVar method of the satellite object. The satellite object is just the object that's created when Launch is deployed onto the page. And if I say, please tell me the value for the page type data element, you can see that it's category, which is the same as this dot notation object that exists on the page. All we're doing is really mapping that into Launch. And so those data elements that we have available can be very powerful. It's a great way to set up variables or mappings to values that exist on the page. It's a great way to make your reporting, your data collection, your reporting and your analysis much more consistent because you know if you're using a data element consistently across your property, then your data collection will be consistent regardless of which site section or page or user experience you happen to be in. The other area that's worth highlighting here real quick are extensions. Again, this is one of the areas where we can customize the way that Launch works, and we can customize for our specific use. So your company, or if you're a partner, you're a consulting firm, and you have a number of clients that you work with, either way, you can customize an extension to to perform a variety of actions when a visitor is actually active on your website. So if I go to the catalog, you can see there's a pretty significant number of extensions. Just like we have Magento extensions, we also have Launch extensions. The difference, obviously, is that for Launch extensions, these extensions are provide code that allow you to change the way the code operates when the visitor is on your site and active on your site. So, for example, if you want to deploy Adobe Audience Manager, you can install the extension in Launch and deploy it directly through Launch. If you want to deploy Adobe Fonts, which formerly Typekit, onto your site to change the look and the feel of your fonts, whether it's your headings or your main content or whatever text values you have, you can just simply deploy the fonts extension in Launch. You can also customize and make your own. So in this property, I have it set up for development. And here's an example of an extension that is for the Adobe Client data layer from Adobe Consulting. It's still in the testing phase. It's not available publicly yet, but I was able to build a version of it and upload it to my own development environment for my company to test it out as part of their beta program that I participated in. So this is just an example of how you or anyone can create a custom extension and upload it so that only you or authorized parties from your company in your Launch properties have access to it. And again, an extension basically operates at runtime when a visitor is active on your site. Now, I should note that we talked quickly about extensibility and how to customize and expand the functionality of Launch and how to make it really work specifically for your needs the way you want it to work. Another way that happens is through the API. And so if everything you see me do on the screen in the user interface is actually an API call under the hood. And so that's the reason that our core extension is an extension. The core extension is what provides the tag management functionality to the system. It allows it to operate as a tag management system. It provides all of the events that you saw in the rules. So if I go back to rules and I go back to our sample, you remember if I clicked on the event that triggers the rule, the core extension here is one of the extensions listed that supplies events to the system for us to use. And when any of these events occur, then this rule will be triggered. And so all of these events are supplied by the core extension. Again, that core extension takes advantage of our API, just like you can. And at the end, we'll take a peek at the API docs and show you where additional resources are so that you can get started if you want to develop your own programs that programmatically interact with our endpoints and our API. You can interact with platform, with Adobe I/O events, with launch events. The Experience Cloud is really opened up in the last few years for developers to customize and configure the exact behavior that they want to achieve. So the extensions, which you see, these little cards that you see on the screen, and the catalog of other extensions that are available, these operate, generally speaking, these operate on your site when a visitor is browsing or shopping, signing up for things, downloading things, etc. That's when an extension comes into play. The API, on the other hand, actually allows you to reach into your properties and your company setup for launch and do things like programmatically set up a new property with all the extensions that you want and a full analytics implementation, for one example. So it's a very powerful way to work. We saw just real quickly when I went in and disabled those rules in the publishing flow. I won't spend too much time on this because we're running tight on time for the other content. But real quickly, the publishing flow, just so you know, can be set up to mirror your existing workflow. You do not have to change how you and your front end of teams work and your development process and your approval process. You don't have to change that entirely just because you have some new tool here with Launch. You can use Launch the way you want to in your own workflow. So for example, with a development environment, I could create a new development environment called QA or staging or test or dev or UAT or whatever. Some companies have 1 or 2 or 3 or 50 non-production environments. Generally speaking, most of our customers have a staging environment and a publishing environment. And you'll see that over on the left-hand side here under development, there's sort of this long gray column. And that indicates that that's a sort of a visual cue, a very subtle cue that you can have multiple development libraries going on at once. So if you have different teams working on different things, different projects in Launch, you can have multiple libraries existing at the same time in different development environments. Then as those developments get shaped up and get ready to be pushed up to staging for review and testing and approval, you can click right here, these 3 little dots, this little icon to build it. You can either build again here for development, or you can actually migrate it up to be considered for approval in your staging environment. And so when you submit it for approval, then whoever has approval rights can review it, run through whatever testing you require, and then approve it so that a publisher can publish it out to production. And as you publish these libraries with these changes out to production, you'll see them over here on the right-hand side under the published column. Again, only one library in staging or production at a time, but as many development libraries as you like. In addition, the libraries themselves can either be hosted by you in your own environment, or by you can have Adobe host them for you. We actually host them on Akamai's infrastructure, but we can host them in our domain that we own and control for you, no additional cost. You see here, I just have a very simple setup with development and production and staging. So if you want to have multiple development environments, you could have dev2, UAT, etc., as many as you like. And so as you're working in the rules and you're setting up your tests and you're setting up your data collection and distribution to tools like analytics, whether it's Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics or what have you, any tools from any of your vendors, you can collect and manage and distribute the data for those tools for any client-side actions using the rules in Launch together with the data elements and the extensions. So let me just jump back here real quickly. We're good on no questions. So I will go back over to the system and just show you one more time. Again, the extensions is one place where we allow customizations, and the APIs are the second place. And we're going to talk a little bit now, move into the next section of the session and talk a little bit about how do we customize this and what's involved with that. So we have a very nice developer site, developer portal set up specifically for Launch. It's being migrated to a main, it will be migrated to a main developer portal. Stay tuned for information on that. But at developer.adobelaunch.com, you can find all the information that you need from a developer perspective, and specifically about the extensions and API resources. So if you click on the extensions, you get pretty much everything you would need to learn about how to create your own extension, how to get set up for that, how to get your permissions set up. This is a quick overview at the different event types. Remember, we chose the event of a page loading, so a page load event. When the window load event fires, that's when our rule was triggered for that alert that we set up. You can also have condition types, which you can have conditions. So whenever the page loads, but only on a certain path, or whenever the page loads and your only certain visitor segment is on the site, etc. So you can apply conditions to those events. And then the rule, of course, has an action. And in our very simple example, the action was just an alert that popped up. But you can have a variety of actions like send data to a system, make an API call to our backend, to a backend CRM system or data warehouse or what have you. Pretty much anything with a web accessible endpoint can be hit with an action type. And there's obviously most of the extensions that are provided in the catalog provide their own action types as well, specific to the behavior of those systems. Data elements, again, we talked about the mapping or the variables. So for example, in the example that we used, we set up a data element that was just page type, pointing to a JavaScript variable that existed on the page. If, say, for example, you want your system requires using local storage or IndexedDB values or other in-browser memory and data storage mechanisms that you need to access for your technology to function, you can create an extension with its own data element type that makes it easy for users to read those different storage mechanisms in browser storage types without having to get technical. They can simply use the drop-down interface, just like you saw me do with this example extension, where I pulled a few drop-down menus and I pasted in a value. And now a non-technical user doesn't have to worry about that anymore. They just have to be aware that there is this page type data element, and referencing that will give them the page type for any page that they're working with. And by the same token, if you want to customize an extension to provide an additional data element type, you can do that. The extensions have a configuration where you configure your extension with any sort of global values or settings values that apply across the entire extension. So for example, if you have a customer number or an API key that's required for your extension to function, the extension configuration view would be the place to provide that input for the customer. And we have some other a little bit more involved, a little bit more technical aspects to extension development, which you can read all about here in the developer docs. We also have quick start guide to get you up and running pretty quickly, how to set up a local development environment, how to obtain the tooling that we make available on GitHub. I believe all of the tooling that's involved in extension development is open source. If it's not every single package, then it's certainly the vast majority of them. Everything that you would need to create your own extensions is up on GitHub, and I can show you that. We can provide you those links at the end of the session, but you can see here in the quick start guide the key packages and the key information that you'd need to get started with your own local project are here. There's a full reference section for each topic, the different types, the event types, the condition types, the action types, etc. So if you were making an extension to customize activity, then you can go through this reference and see in detail some examples of how these things work, even the extension flow, how the system works at runtime in the browser versus an extension package and the launch application and how they all fit together. It's all in here for you. And then down at the bottom, we have an area in the docs about submissions. So if you want to see your extension live in our interface in your own development environment, in your own development property, or if you want to make it publicly available to all Adobe customers, you can do that as well. And these submission steps that you see here on the left side of the extension guides tells you step by step how to get your company set up, how to set up users, how to go through the process of developing an extension, uploading it to our system and testing it end to end. So this is a very complete guide. We have a little over 800 developers, I think almost 900 developers in a community Slack workspace, and that information's here for support. So the launch team, the engineering team, the product management team are very active in there. It just should point out that this Slack workspace is not an Adobe-owned Slack channel. It's a community resource. A lot of folks from Adobe are active in it, including, as I mentioned, the engineering PM teams. But there are many other folks that application developers and extension developers who have contributed to the catalog are also very active there. So if you're considering working with our APIs or developing your own extension, definitely recommend that you check out that Slack workspace. It's a great resource. And then the API docs shows examples, a very similar setup, of course, how to authenticate, how to encrypt values, and then a reference guide for each of our endpoints using the structure of our API. Just one note that we do follow a spec with our API. The spec that we follow is listed at the jasonapi.org site. And so we use the JSON API specification as they describe it in detail at that site. So that's a good thing because it makes it much more easy to traverse and navigate through the API, and also makes it easy to reason about the expected return values for different endpoints. So for example, here's a properties endpoint, and I can list the properties in my company using the API. So in the user interface, if I go back here and I go to properties and I click this button, if I open the developer DevTools console and I click here and I go to properties and I went to the network tab and I track down the API call for that specific view that you're looking at right now, it's exactly the same as this would be in a terminal window. So if I provide the company ID for a specific company and I list the properties by hitting this properties endpoint, and I supply my credentials, my authorization token, and my org ID, just supply the correct credential information, it looks something like this. And if, again, here's that properties, if you can see up here, this properties endpoint with all the information that I've added. And if I hit return and send this and I get lucky, there it is. I was kidding about getting lucky. You pretty much get lucky every time as long as your credentials are correct. So here's a response from an API call just using a curl command in my terminal window. And I have it printed here just for visibility. So here's one property right here. Here's the name and when it was updated and some other data and metadata about the property. And if I scroll back up, there's another property, and the property we're in right now, I believe, is right here. Yep. And so we can see that this property is turned on for extension development. So if I upload my own customized extension into this property, it'll allow me to work with it and potentially migrate it to public status so that everyone can use it. The API returned a variety of information. And the example response here, strangely enough, looks almost exactly like the information that I received from the call that I just made. So you can see very standardized responses, very standardized API calls, endpoints. So it's really easy to work with. You can filter, you can search, you can traverse different pages if there's a multi-page response. So very easy to work with this. I'm not an engineer, and it's easy for me. So it should be very easy for any of your developers to work with. And so by using the API and making a number of calls, obviously, as I said in the beginning, pretty much anything we can do here in the interface, we can do using the API calls. And if I come back here, you see that each of these areas within the reference guide here, the audit events, builds, callbacks, a list of companies, data elements, environments, etc. Each one of the main components of the launch system are accessible through these APIs. And so if you don't really like the way a certain sequence of things are done in Launch, if you don't like the way our user interface presents certain screens or presents certain information, or you just want to gain the efficiencies of doing things in an automated way, then I would definitely encourage you to check out the API documentation, maybe jump into Postman. We do have a Postman collection to make it super easy for you to get started and play with the APIs and see what the potential is for customizations. We do have a number of partners and consultants who've customized full Adobe digital experience deployments using the Launch API. So they programmatically plug into a launch company and a property and set that property up. Instead of doing it manually, they do it using our API with a program that they've set up.
Hi, Sherry, you back here?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hey.
Oh, I think I was in another room. Sorry about that. So just to finish up, I know we're almost out of time. On GitHub, if you search the organizations, you search Adobe as an organization, it's github.com/orgs/Adobe. There are teams listed, and one of the teams is the Reactor team. Reactor is it originally was the project name of the product before it went to branding and got its official name. But it's currently, we use Reactor to refer to all of the sort of under the hood systems, the underlying systems, if you will, that power Launch. And if the names are confusing and the terms are confusing, we do have a guide. There it is under reference. So we even have a glossary. And so if you don't know what a certain thing is, and you can jump here to the glossary. These are the underlying services that power Launch. So the Reactor team has a series, currently, what is it? Excuse me, 19 repos in the Reactor team. And these are all of the packages that our engineers use to work with the system and that you can use either to develop extensions or to work with our API. So for example, here's a Hello World extension and another sample extension for Hotjar, which is one of those remarketing and retargeting advertising type tags. And so here is the Reactor Hotjar extension. This again is a sample extension that you can download and use as a model for your own custom project. We also have a Hello World extension. If you're interested in building an extension, this also could serve as a sort of a base for your own project. And we have a variety of other tools, packages, NPM packages that are available to help get you started up and running with either the extensions or the APIs. So again, the system is fully customizable, and I know I've spent quite a bit of time during this session on the opportunities to customize the system, but don't feel like you have to. I want to emphasize that the system is fully capable and has been tested on some of the largest sites on the internet, literally, with an unbelievable amount of traffic, at least unbelievable for me, that one site or several sites could get as much traffic as they are getting. So it's been battle tested for a number of years, and it's very fully functional out of the box, just the way it is. It doesn't require any customization, so just want to mention that. But if your company has, say, for example, a group of tags that you work with, so out of this list of all these different logos and these different 8,000 vendors supplying tags to your company. If you have a list of 10 of them or 20 of them that you use and you want to create your own custom extension to sort of pre-package those together instead of using a bunch of separate extensions, if you prefer to work that way, you're able to. But at the same time, you don't have to. You can use the extensions as they exist. We also have custom extensions that help you customize if there is a vendor that you work with that is not currently in our catalog. There are a number of generic utility extensions that allow you to deploy that without getting the front-end development team from your company involved. So again, just want to reiterate that while it is extensible and it is customizable, you don't have to customize it. You can use it just the way it is right out of the box. And so I know we're just about out of time, so I'll jump back in here in the room and see if I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And let's see if we have any questions. And let's see, in the session, no questions. So thank you all very much for your time. Appreciate it. I hope you learned something about Launch and how you may be able to use Launch with your Magento store to help make it easier and more efficient for you to manage your marketing and advertising technologies and also any data collection and distribution that you might need to do. Thanks very much and hope you have a good day.